The catastrophic protagonist from the hit series Chainsaw Man, Denji, versus the 8-handled sword Mahoraga. The boy who sports chainsaws from his body versus the 10 sacred treasure. Both characters have stark similarities with vast differences. The way these two characters would interact would be fascinating, as they both have an overpowered arsenal of hacks, weapons and abilities that enable them to become the most feared entities in their respected verse. Oh, except for these two characters. I did a video on these two characters, you should check that out. Before we get into the video, I'd like to ask everyone if you could please leave a comment, a like, and even if you're feeling super generous, subscribe to me. You guys really did motivate me to smash out this video after all the support on my Makima vs Sukuna video. Words can't express how much joy that gave me. Also, if you want to check out some more of these style videos, I have a Naruto vs Gojo video and a Hell's Paradise video. Thank you once again, and let's get into it. Disclaimer, massive spoilers for Chainsaw Man up until volume 12. There will be some feats discussed from later chapters, but I really only have volumes 1 to 12 in my collection, so I will be sticking with mostly part 1 of Chainsaw Man. I will definitely be making more videos on Chainsaw Man when I have those volumes in hand. And obviously spoilers for Jujutsu Kaisen. We're going to start with JJK, as it is somewhat more straightforward, in my opinion, to explain. We will be using the anime for this battle, as it's just way more enjoyable, and I have no reason to exclude it, as it paints a very similar narrative that Gege painted in his manga. Mahoraga is born from the 10 Shadows technique, an ability so powerful that it is one of the only counters in the series to Gojo's Limitless technique. The possessor of the 10 Shadows is able to summon 10 different and unique Shikigami, with its final Shikigami, who was never tamed by a single sorcerer in history. Pretty insane if you consider statements like the Heian era 1000 years ago is considered the golden age of Jujutsu. The clearest way to scale Mahoraga is with his famous fight against a 15-finger Sukuna, where he displays his cunning. Mahoraga is able to imbue his attacks with positive and negative energy. Positive energy is known in the community for healing. However, this blade wrapped in this positive energy makes them extremely deadly for any curse or cursed spirit. Keep a note on that particularly. And cursed energy in JJK is negative inherently and is used to reinforce Mahoraga's strikes against Sukuna, which he launches him through multiple large buildings. Now, if you believe Mahoraga, in order to endure his own attacks without his arm disintegrating at the seam, then Mahoraga's casual AP and durability would easily scale to large building level, again without much effort. By the way, this is just a backhand, this isn't just like an actual physical strike with all of his body weight. Not to mention how he is able to throw trains at buildings and almost axe them, again super casually. We must also acknowledge that Mahoraga most definitely scales comfortably above Jogo, who was going to wipe out the entirety of Shibuya with his maximum meteor technique, which was stated to do damage to Sukuna if it had hit. Scaling above Jogo is pretty crazy, as he is able to one-shot a grade 1 sorcerer who are able to fight on par with special grade curses. Special grades, of course, being the entities that need a cluster bomb in order to be dealt with, and Jogo scales massively above this level, and Mahoraga scaling above him. Makes sense. Debaters would actually disagree with this DC level scaling, as another natural disaster curse called Dagon summoned an island with an unknown light source. Well, there are some people out there that believe Dagon can create a star. If that's you, then by all means, debate that. I ain't debating that stuff. I would simply argue that Dagon teleports his opponents to an island, but these JJK fans will say anything to get Gojo at Universal or something. Believe me, I've seen 4D and 5D JJK wanks. In terms of where Mahoraga exactly scales, this is actually quite tricky, as we need to outline that there are two distinct Mahoragas, the first of which being the one summoned by Megumi Fushiguro, and the second one summoned by Sukuna. Now, comparing these two to other sorcerers in the verse is also tricky, but for the meantime, just know that when he is summoned, Mahoraga can comfortably fight the top tiers of the verse. Definitely not win, but contends pretty well against Sukuna and Gojo. Speed-wise, things get annoying again, as Mahoraga should scale comfortably above Jogo in speed 2. Definitely doing infinitely better than him in his fight with Sukuna, as he tags him multiple times. Sorry Jogo fans, it's just not looking good for your boy. I've had a hard time scaling JJK in the past before, and it's fairly inconsistent, so I'll offer multiple ways to interpret Mahoraga's speed, and we can discuss it in the comments. Maki, who is nowhere near Mahoraga, catches a bullet calced at Mark 8 to 10. Awakened Maki thinks Mark 3 is a top tier in the verse before blitzing Mark 3. Hikari, a higher mid to top tier of the verse, moves out of the way of Kashimo's lightning bolt and moves so fast in compared to it, it has been calced at over Mark 4000. Or just generally considered as a lightning timer. People will disagree with this calc, calling it nowhere near lightning level, but if you actually look at how much Hikari had to move his body in comparison to the lightning bolt, it actually would end up being much faster than lightning itself. I'd really like to see how this feat gets animated, and I would really wonder how well this video will age. Now, Mahoraga doesn't necessarily scale to Hikari, and we have no idea how the two would interact. The two are just simply different fighters, and lightning feats take place an arc later. The best we can do for Mahoraga is scale him up to when Sukuna summons him, where he fights Gojo, and does pretty well and doesn't get instantly speed blitzed by him. However, it's not AP and speed that keeps Mahoraga in the game, and I'll be honest, it's his adaptation ability. Mahoraga possesses the heavily inspired Dharma wheel. The 8-handed wheel moves when Mahoraga encounters a phenomenon, whether that be a technique, attack, or environmental factor. If the technique doesn't instantly kill Mahoraga in one shot, then there really is no point. The wheel will simply turn and the creature will begin to adapt. The ability in question will be rendered extremely weaker than its original counterpart, or just be rendered completely ineffective. Now let me make this clear. Mahoraga adapting and increasing his physicality, speed, and durability is most likely not the case, as shown with his 2 fights with Gojo and Sukuna. However, it is more than likely that he is able to increase his reaction time, as Sukuna acknowledges that he can see his technique, making it easier to react to. If you want to be super generous to Mahoraga, you could say Sukuna's Shikigami are way larger, heavier, and impressive than Megumi. Putting a concrete number between the two Mahoragas is really suspect. If you want me to guess, I'd say it's like a 25% increase or so if you say Mahoraga put up a decent fight against 15 Finger Sukuna, and puts up a similar, if not better fight against Jogo, who scales more to 19 Finger Sukuna. Definitely not a concrete number, but that's my guess. You could definitely argue way more, but I would equally argue that Sukuna is massively holding back against Mahoraga and just wants to test out his theory. Regarding speed in JJK, the most consistent and fair thing you could say is that lightning timing is a top tier in the verse, and light speed is a Sukuna exclusive. Unfortunately, JJK has a pretty massive power cliff, and most people don't want to acknowledge it, as there are many ways to scale Yuta, Kashimo, Yuki, and Hikari all above the disaster curses pretty badly. And Mahoraga is definitely doing better than Jogo, but it's not to the point where he's blitzing Sukuna or anything like that. In fact, a lot of people would argue Sukuna is massively holding back, as mentioned before, and just wants to test out his crazy theory. To further support the power cliff, even just look at Yuji in Shibuya and look at his increases and compare him to the top tiers of the Culling games. Even look at these guys fighting stronger versions of Sukuna than Gojo fought. Unfortunately, JJK isn't immune to these end of series power cliffs that most shonen have, like Dragon Ball and Naruto. The JJK cliff gets even worse when you consider that Yuta, who a lot of people believe is a Hikari victim, was actually confident in fighting Sukuna, summoned by Mahoraga. So Hikari and Kashimo honestly might be stronger than both Mahoragas. Pretty crazy. Now, Mahoraga's adaptation ability I don't want to discredit and is perhaps shown off in two amazing instances, the first of which being against Yorozu's technique whereby she summons a perfect sphere. Now, a perfect sphere is a theoretically impossible concept. In order for the sphere to be perfect, it would require infinite points of contact and thus having infinite surface area, which would grant it wielding infinite pressure, which could apparently destroy anything it touches. These mangaka are really going insane, and they have come a long way from simply Naruto focusing his spirit energy to his feet to stick to water. Anyway, Mahoraga, after a few exchanges, is able to not only interact with the perfect sphere, but shatter it after adapting to it. This is also consistent in the series with Mahoraga's other most impressive feat, that being able to adapt to Gojo's Limitless technique, and it being the main reason Sukuna took such interest in Megumi. Gojo's neutral Limitless is spatial manipulation, and if you want more Gojo information, check out this video as we go over that technique, and it would be too long and annoying to explain here. There seems to be no limit to this creature's devastating ability to adapt. Now, I don't necessarily agree that Mahoraga's AP is infinite or anything like that. It simply means that in terms of hacks abilities, which JJK is famous for, they don't really mean anything to the Dharma wheel. Now moving to Chainsaw Man. Interestingly, you might think Denji isn't that strong, he'd probably just get adapted to and one-shot, right? But if you stick around for the video, we'll see, and we'll definitely talk about it. Devils in Chainsaw Man, or hybrids in this case, are particularly special. Denji has a contract with Pochita. In exchange with Denji living a normal life, Pochita became Denji's heart, allowing him to become a hybrid, which grants him superhuman abilities. Denji, for all intents and purposes, particularly for this video, is immortal. Devils are born in hell, that eventually die and reincarnate into the real world. Devils who die on Earth reincarnate to hell, and guess what? The cycle repeats itself. Denji can get cut in half, lose limbs, lose 80% of his body, but as long as he has access to blood, yes, even devil blood, he is able to regenerate. Take for example this battle with the Eternity Devil where he fought for 3 straight days, surviving on nothing but adrenaline and blood. Any and all injuries were healed through just attacking and drinking blood. In terms of speed, Chainsaw Man is super complicated, and I think I need to give it a bit more credit, and I know definitely I missed out on a few things on my Makima video, the most obvious of which being a character called Quan Zi, who has a feat of blitzing multiple people and devil-controlled puppets, all of which were capable of fighting Chainsaw Man. Now, I hate doing this, but this feat is kind of bullshit and is calced anywhere from Mark 1 to 200. You might be asking yourself, why such a huge gap? Well, it's because in Chainsaw Man, Fujimoto usually gives us a timer and a distance. So, of course, we can just use the speed formula to find out how fast someone was going. How far did Quan Zi travel? Don't know. What about the amount of time? Don't know. Also, the feat shows Quan Zi blitzing people from behind, so it's really debatable. Until we get this scene animated, I will leave it up to you guys in the comments to decide how fast is Quan Zi actually going in this instance. Now we'll be going into some new territory with speed, as Denji early on his career was able to blitz 2 goons before they could even react or pull the trigger, which is calced pretty high at Mark 10 to 50. Faster than Kursunaya's Mark 3 top tier speed in JJK. No, jokes aside, seriously. Denji was also able to react to gunfire pretty easily and on a pretty regular basis. I mean, normal humans and devil hunters can do this in Chainsaw Man, so depending on the distance they dodge the bullets, it can be calced at sonic to hypersonic, pretty consistent. And if you ask me, this makes sense as the characters are literally looking to square up with the Gun Devil. Things get even crazier when we look to a character called Beam, who actually somewhat dodges an explosion at almost point blank range. And Beam is by no means a top tier in the verse, and he actually does this while heavily injured. Dodging an explosion is calced at Mark 100 to 200, being massively hypersonic. In regards to AP and durability, Chainsaw Man easily takes massive explosions capable of destroying large buildings without losing any limbs. Of course, he does lose limbs, but you know, he does alright most of the time. Not really impressive compared to the city stomping Jogo in JJK, right? But we need to look a little deeper and towards a fight with Santa Claus. Bro took an explosion and handled 1000 degrees Celsius per second. Even more ridiculous is Pochita being able to rip his heart and re-entering the atmosphere, which would be around 3 to 5,000 degrees Celsius depending on the speed, surface area and all that crap. Now speaking of Denji's transform state, this is where things get super interesting. And let me tell you, this battle started to really hurt my brain, and this is where things start to get crazy. Chainsaw Man, or the completed form of Pochita, is stated to be the most feared devil in the series. Even to the point where he is feared by other devils, and if you stick around, I'll tell you why in a moment. Names in Chainsaw Man wield power. The more a person fears a name, the greater the power. Fish devils aren't as strong as eternity devils. Seems pretty obvious, but the reason this is important is because the Chainsaw Man would therefore scale heavily above the Gun Devil's multi-building level feats, the hybrid Aki gun capable of destroying a city block, and even more likely scale above the primordial devils. Speed-wise, this Chainsaw Man gets insane. His speed would far scale above Makima, who fires a spear carried by a laser beam. Now, this feat is hugely contentious and controversial in the series, as people argue Kobeni was able to flinch before the spear is intercepted. Kobeni, of course, being a character only seen as a hypersonic character being able to dodge bullets. However, you could equally argue that she just reacted after Chainsaw Man got hit by the spear. The spear being carried by a laser moving at light speed is also hugely debatable, but it's anime logic. Things can get thrown at light speed all the time and it doesn't really matter. Now, Lightspeed Chainsaw Man is really inconsistent and edgy, as Mark 100 to 1000 tends to be where Chainsaw Man sits. Even this feat of him blowing apart these hybrid devils are calced at Mark 40 to 70, and it did this super casually. Now you might be asking, Catchdog, what is Mark 1000 doing here? Well, it's actually due to Makima's ability to react to and use an ability in response to a bullet fired by the Gun Devil that crossed 500 kilometers in under a second, which has been calced at Mark 1000, possibly more depending on the interpretation of the scene. And Makima calls her fight with Chainsaw Man unwinnable. Even more ridiculous is the fact that she spent the entire arc making Chainsaw Man a hero in the world, thus weakening him. So, Denji in this instance isn't even full power. You'd think it stops there, but you'd be wrong, as we need to get into what Chainsaw Man's main ability is. Chainsaw Man can literally delete you from existence. He's kind of like the Devil's Devil, if you will, and is referred to as the devil that devils fear the most. And this statement is used a lot, and scaling Chainsaw Man above Makima becomes even more consistent. Remember how strong this bitch was with all of her hacks abilities, immortality, 50 summons, contract with hell, a crushing force? This fight with Chainsaw Man was unwinnable, even while he was nerfed. Now you might be asking yourself, what is this ability Chainsaw Man has to remove you from existence? Well, when Chainsaw Man consumes you, you are actually removed from existence to such a horrific point that people in the world forget your names. If he consumes Mahoraga, he will literally be deleted from existence. This existence erasure isn't like some purple that Gojo fires, or some sealing jutsu in Naruto. The people around Chainsaw Man literally don't remember a thing about you. Now, with the abilities and the scaling finally discussed, now we can talk about how the two would actually fight each other. Now, this will be similar to my Makima vs Sukuna video, where it does actually depend on your interpretation on how these two characters' vast arsenals will interact with each other. And it is very crucial for a cross-verse situation. In terms of power and speed, it is more than likely that Chainsaw Man or Pochita is more powerful than Mahoraga. Now, before you lose your mind, let me explain why. Chainsaw Man has eaten the nuclear bomb devil. which is a devil that, if it does anything to what you think it would use nuclear bombs, which is way more obviously impressive than anything Mahoraga can do in terms of AP. And you really need to be giving Mahoraga the benefit of the doubt to say that he is a nuclear bomb wielding threat. The only way that you could realistically get Mahoraga to these levels is if you think that Mahoraga scales somewhat to Sukuna, and using the back of the volume statements and Yuki's black hole, he was going to destroy the world. However, I would simply argue Megumi's Mahoraga was disintegrated by Sukuna's domain expansion, and which put a massive hole in Shibuya. The scaling just doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Jujutsu Kaisen being this planetary 4D stuff. And all those characters slicing a planet in half with a domain expansion seems really funky to me. But if you want to say that, then sure, it might give Mahoraga a massive edge. There are probably some ways that you could maybe argue Sukuna's fire arrow is like a nuclear bomb level threat, then go ahead. But even the Falling Devil, which Chainsaw Man scales massively above, is this worldwide calamity that is causing cave-ins and landslides across the entire planet. So this devil is literally like a natural disaster that is shaking the planet. And I'll be honest, Mahoraga's speed to Hikari is being super generous. If he's summoned by Megumi, then he is 100% not comparable to Chainsaw Man at all, and we really should be talking about the Sukuna summoned Mahoraga. This would also just blatantly saying no to faster than light Chainsaw Man arguments, which I honestly sort of agree with. Now, the biggest question: could Mahoraga adapt to Chainsaw Man before he is sliced into a million pieces and eaten, thus erased from existence? And the answer to that question is probably not. Especially when we consider Mahoraga's adaptation is known to be slow, especially slow when the abilities are very complicated and complex, as shown with Gojo. And Chainsaw Man doesn't take his time in fights, he doesn't mess around. He's seen instantly blitzing and one-shotting his opponents, leaving nothing left and then consuming them. Nobody in the background who would be watching this fight would even remember who or what Mahoraga was, and the Zenin clan would think that their technique included 9 Shikigami, funny enough. Keep in mind, any damage that Mahoraga would take would just simply allow Chainsaw Man to regenerate. If you think is at all close and they could square up, then any damage would just heal Chainsaw Man's organs, body parts, weapons, anything. And let's be generous to Mahoraga. If you think Chainsaw Man would just sit there, maybe take his time, you know, maybe eat him slowly, then yeah, of course Chainsaw Man would get adapted to. However, we need to also take into account that even getting partially eaten is supposed to massively weaken you, as seen by the War Devil. Let's keep this in mind. The immortal War Devil that has a better immortality than anything we see in Jujutsu Kaisen is weakened because he got partially consumed. Now, I could totally understand maybe the positive energy blade doing some serious damage to Chainsaw Man and sending him to hell. In that unlikely event, Mahoraga adapts in time, maybe he kills Chainsaw Man with the positive weapon, Pochita would simply be reincarnated into hell, and I'm not kidding, possibly eat and erase more devils, returning stronger than ever before. Can you imagine for a second if Chainsaw Man ate the adaptation devil? Keep in mind, Mahoraga was destroyed by purple, which erases your physical body, and the way Chainsaw Man erases you is way more impressive. It is really on some Bleach Ichibei level shit, and people gotta stop downplaying Chainsaw Man. Some people would argue Mahoraga could simply adapt to Denji's immortality, but this just is not the case, and the immortality is an inherent feature of being a devil, and there is no way of proving Mahoraga can kill an immortal being. The reincarnation cycle would simply just return a stronger Chainsaw Man to the world. If Mahoraga could adapt to the immortality, he would have eventually worked up a way to kill Sukuna, and I cannot stress this enough. Sukuna's fingers grant him a level of immortality, and Mahoraga was literally helpless in his ability to fight Sukuna. Not to say Mahoraga wouldn't destroy normal Denji, or even like normal Chainsaw Man. That fight isn't close, but this transformed Chainsaw Man is a different story. But, you know, I will grant you that if you think Chainsaw Man getting sent to hell is a win con, then by all means, maybe Mahoraga could send him to hell maybe once or twice. Maybe that's a win con. Mahoraga unfortunately just doesn't appear to have the AP or the hacks enough to kill Chainsaw Man for good. Maybe with some generous scaling you could say that Mahoraga could do something, but I doubt it. If you're being fair to both series, Chainsaw Man has the speed, attack power, and the hacks to win, and he is clearly the winner. Well, I hope that didn't make you guys too mad. I would honestly like to know what you guys think of the video. I do think Mahoraga could win, but I know that is going to make a lot of people upset. In my opinion, I was very generous to Mahoraga and I actually didn't go crazy with Chainsaw Man as much as I'd like to. When I first started the video, I really did think Chainsaw Man would get slammed and he'd just probably get adapted to and, you know, sent to hell. But the deeper I looked and the more at the scaling I looked, the more I realized that the calcs actually do favor Chainsaw Man and the hacks definitely outweigh Mahoraga's adaptation. Let me know what you guys think of Chainsaw Man versus, you know, maybe another character. I want to thank you guys one more time for the support on the new Makima versus Sukuna video. That was absolutely insane, and I put a lot of effort into the video. If you guys have any issues with the video, please put it down in the comments. You know, possibly subscribe. I would love to get your opinion on this topic, and you guys gotta stop downplaying Chainsaw Man. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later. Bye.